What's going on, everybody? This is JVP, and you're listening to a new episode of the Postgame Report. So, E3 is canceled for this year. Will ever return? That's the big question. A lot of people have been asking that. I've never been to E3. That is one of the things in the gaming industry I was never able to do. I've had opportunities, but things came up where I couldn't make it. There was several times where I had media passes and everything. I just couldn't make it. So the thing about E3, it felt like when an E3 was approaching, it felt like a holiday. A lot of people that I podcast with or that I interacted with on the internet that we all loved video games and even people in real life, a lot of us were excited about E3 because it was a chance to see brand new games. And then you have the press conferences. You had Microsoft trying to outdo PlayStation, PlayStation trying to outdo Microsoft. And then you had Nintendo for a little bit until they started doing their own thing. And not only was it the big console makers, but you had the big publishers doing their showcases as well. And every year it was something that you would look forward to. When E3 was coming, you knew that it was a certain time of year. It was always in June. And for me, I used to schedule my vacation around E3. I used to schedule, because in my old job as an elevator technician, once a month we had to work the weekends. So I made sure that E3 didn't come around when it was my turn to work a weekend. I would take a vacation day or two. Usually I would take that Friday leading into E3. I would have the weekend off because sometimes Microsoft used to hold their press conference on a Sunday. And a few other publishers as well used to do the same thing. And then Monday was PlayStation's turn. And for a while, PlayStation used to have a viewing in certain parts of the country. So in New York City, it was always in Union Square, 14th Street. And so quite a few times I've went in person, sat in this big ass movie theater with a whole bunch of strangers, and we all were there for the same thing, to see what PlayStation was ready to do. And we would all leave there extremely happy and excited for the year to come. Unfortunately, because of change, E3 is in danger of never coming back. Obviously, it started out with COVID, where the entire world was in lockdown. And then publishers, even before COVID, started to delve into hosting their own events, previewing their own games in a much controlled area, more controlled environment, excuse me. And what COVID changed was the fact that, for example, PlayStation no longer needed to go to E3 in order to showcase their upcoming titles. So now you see what Nintendo has done. They're the first one who had their own annual press event showing whatever they were going to show. And now PlayStation is doing it. Microsoft is on the cusp of doing the same thing. They've had their own shows throughout the year. You have a lot of small, like for example with PlayStation, you have a lot of small 30-minute segments on YouTube where it's nothing but either third-party titles or indie titles. They'll let you know ahead of time. Same thing with Microsoft. They were showcasing some of their Xbox Series games, and so they only showcased what is coming out for the Xbox Series, and that was I believe I believe Nintendo was the last console maker to hold a show. So whether it's a state of play or an Xbox, whatever they call it, I believe Nintendo calls their press event Treehouse or something along that line. Nothing is going to beat that freaking E3 experience, that anticipation. Nothing is going to beat that. The closest that we can get to an E3 is if Sony announces a huge state of play where they are showcasing all of their upcoming titles, something along that line, because they haven't done a real big, heavy duty state of play. So that would be the closest. And even that, I don't think would truly match that anticipation, specifically when it's Friday and you realize, holy crap, Sunday, Microsoft's going to hold their press event. Or we're going to see something from Epic or Bethesda, right? So you knew that Microsoft and a few other publishers were going to start things off on a Sunday. And then you had to wait till Monday evening for PlayStation to showcase their games to see what Sony was going to answer with. And the spectacles, that came with these press conferences. Microsoft and PlayStation had their fair share of corny ass presenters. You had the whole Connect thing where people were dancing, looking goofy on the Xbox side. You had PlayStation with, Ridge Racer and stabbing the crab in the stomach for, huge damage and so on and so on. But those crazy stories, those embarrassing moments are memorable. They are something that people talk about nowadays. And you can remember where the hell you were when you were watching that. For example, when PlayStation revealed the PlayStation 3, I remember I was in a different room in my house. So way back then, I took over one of the rooms. It was my man cave / guest room. And I remember sitting in front of the computer screen, watching PlayStation do their press event. And I remember when Crazy Kutaragi went up there and announced the price, I remember laughing my ass off. I was cracking the hell up. I immediately started calling my friends, and we were like, can you believe this shit? And that became the topic of discussion for many, many freaking weeks. And that was only amongst my friends. Back then, I was podcasting. And that was another, amongst the podcasters, that was a huge freaking piece of news because the Xbox was already out. The 360, that is. And it's moments like that where you see these things unfold in front of you and you're like, oh my God, like the video game world has changed. For example, when they showed Killzone 2, right? Everybody knows that now famous E3 where they showed this incredible looking render of Killzone 2 and how it's going to look, blah, blah, blah. And then we found out that wasn't supposed to be shown, things like that. So I remember a friend of mine calling me, okay? And this friend, I met him through Xbox Live. And we used to play Rainbow Six 3 all the freaking time. That was our thing, right? Every night, a bunch of us would get together over Xbox Live and play Rainbow Six 3. So he calls me up and he starts going, yo, I saw that Killzone 2 thing. I think I might have to buy a PlayStation 3. And I'm telling him, dude, you're going to fall for that shit? that's nothing but a damn CGI fake. Like that's not how the game is going to look. I was, that hardcore Xbox guy telling another dude, no, you shouldn't be fooled by this Killzone 2 video. So he wound up buying a PlayStation 3, but to sell it, he was reselling it. I don't know if he made a profit out of it because the damn thing was expensive. And then I remember there was one E3 where Xbox, on the Xbox 360, they announced that a game was available as a demo right on the spot. And I can't remember the damn name, but it was a game where it was in a frozen planet, and you had like a freaking attachment in your arm that you can rappel up, and they came out with like 3 different versions of that game. But I remember this demo coming out, and everybody was so freaking excited because the game looked pretty dope, and the demo was good. I wish I could remember the damn name of the game, but the premise of the game was that you were in this frozen planet and you had these giant bugs coming at you. And of course, it was a third person shooter with climbing elements. You had this, a device attached to your wrist, and you can rappel up on the side, the side of a mountain, stuff like that. It's something planet. Man, I got a brain injury, so forgive me. So I remember thinking specifically that this was the potential of Xbox Live. This was what was going to be the future of Xbox Live. I remember thinking it. I remember thinking, man, imagine if Xbox does this every freaking year where they say, you know what? We are releasing this game right now. You can download it. You could purchase it. So it didn't turn out quite like that. But now, obviously both PlayStation, well, all of them. You have Steam on the PC, you have Nintendo's store, you have an online store, Xbox has an online store, PlayStation has an online store. So you can technically, on day one, buy everything. As the game launches, you could buy something. Whereas with Hi-Fi Rush, Xbox went and did a stealth drop. They said, hey, this game right now that you just saw a video of is dropping right now. And that's the potential, obviously, of having, internet on your video game consoles, is the ability to do things like that. Now, financially, it's a different story, and it's not financially a financially stable practice. But I remember thinking that, man, this is the potential that Xbox Live has. And, man, it wasn't Frozen Planet. Damn, it was something Planet. And they made 3 different, they made 3 games out of that franchise. So there's nothing that's going to match E3. There's nothing that's going to match E3. And then, of course, you get to wait for, I had a crap load of friends who went to E3 every year. So waiting for their feedback, waiting for their articles to come out on their respective websites, or having them talk about it on their respective podcast, excuse me. There was an excitement about that too. Now, of course, a lot of times I got the lowdown before they posted it in an article or an audio or video. Back then, there wasn't much video. So I had a slight edge. I didn't use that edge for personal purposes. Like, I didn't go and take somebody's information and then go spreading, spitting out these not insider, but let's say somebody went, they previewed a game that's under strict NDA, They're telling me about it. I didn't go out there for personal gain and leak all this stuff. People knew that, so people used to tell me all kind of shit. And it was an excitement in that. There was an excitement of waiting for somebody you knew that was about to tell you something really cool. And I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss that. I mean, so many gaming events have gone away. There's still PAX. You still have that. But I saw somebody live streaming from PAX East. That was a few weeks ago. And I can't believe that I didn't even realize that PAX was still a thing. Whereas I remember going to the first PAX East, and that was a huge freaking deal. The Postgame Report crew was there. A lot of podcasters that we knew for years, but we never met in person. A bunch of us met in person and bonded. Like it strengthened our relationships, right? It made it legit. Once you meet somebody online, you're cool with them, blah, blah. But when you meet somebody in person and you guys have dinner, hang out, there's a stronger bond, right? Because you get to really see the person and study them. You know, people can make up shit on the internet, make up a personality. But when you see them in person, it's a whole different deal. So I remember seeing people at the first PAX East, and they recognized me right away. They recognized me because of my voice. They would hear Podtacular. They would hear me on the Postgame Report. They would hear me on Gamertag Radio. I was in a lot of fucking podcasts, and I would be interviewed by Trixie for the Xbox Live, community events. I was always in different websites as, their guest for the community events. I was very hands-on with the community. So people recognized my voice and would come up to me and be like, yo, you're JVB? And I'm like, yes. And I would tell them, yo, my name is Jose. I have to call me JVB. But till this day, there's people who call me JVB instead of Jose. So it was a special time. Like the community was thriving. I've stated this before. The community, we used to police ourselves. If you wanted to hang out at a PAX or go to an E3 and there was beef, a bunch of us would get together and we would make sure that the people involved were going to squash it immediately. We knew that we had an opportunity to showcase what our community was capable of. There was a bunch of Latinos, Hispanics, I'll say Hispanics, because everybody wants to be politically correct. So by saying Hispanics, I'm including male and female. You had black people. We were the dominant demographic of people who came up podcasting. There were a lot of us who were Hispanic, whether they were Dominican or Puerto Rican or Ecuadorian, whatever. And then you had a lot of black people who were podcasting. They came up. They were just as involved in the community as anyone else. And then you had the majority of white people who were working for these bigger websites and looking, not only working for bigger websites, right, in some capacity. Most of them were journalists. Some of them were community managers. Some of them were public relations people. Most community managers, they knew somebody, so they gave them a job. Things like that, right? When podcasting was a thing, when it was beginning to flourish, journalists used to laugh at us. And there's a freaking dog barking in the background. Journalists used to laugh at us because they were like, what is this thing these people are doing? Why do they think they could be here with us? I used to see them at events. They would look at us, and all these journalists used to hang out together because, God forbid, they hung out with us Puerto Rican and black people. So they would be in their little circles. They would look at us. They'd They see us with our microphones, with our recording devices. They see us hustling, trying to get to these interviews, trying to give the best content as possible. And then they would come with their media passes, purposely come in front of us, get the interviews first, write them up before everybody else. That's how it was. And then years later, they were getting into podcasting because they realized that this was a new medium, a new way to communicate information with a wider audience. People didn't want to read, you know? People much rather listen to something. They can listen to a podcast in the background while they're driving. And so this new medium, known as podcasting, was taking off. Journalists were starting to come in. And then guess what? All of these, all the people of color were now taking a back seat to the more popular ex-journalists and blah, blah, blah. And then celebrities got into it. But I'm talking about video games. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I've seen it firsthand. And there's plenty of, I'm Puerto Rican, but there's plenty of Hispanics and blacks who were instrumental in creating this community. As much as people like to talk about Paris was right there with me. Granted, I was there before him, but he was very instrumental as well. And he's still involved with the community. So am I, to a point. I gave up my community duties because I started to see a shift in how the community was dying because of social media. And I saw that years in advance. And I said, it's time to just step back and not be as heavy as I used to be, heavily involved into building a community known as, the community we see now, unfortunately, is something that I'm responsible for helping to build. But I knew once forums, I knew that once, specifically Twitter, I said it from the get-go. I said, you know what? Twitter is going to destroy our forums. And people called me crazy. I said, dude, I'm telling you. I say dude to everybody, male and female. I was telling anyone who would listen, Twitter was going to fuck up our website. And it messed up a lot of people's websites. It is still something that a lot of established websites, not just video games, media websites have to deal with. Because now you get your information immediately on Twitter. People rather post videos and post news first on Twitter. So people within the video game community were once again, the video game community did something before the major outlets began to do it. And that was we began to promote our podcast on social media. I remember one gentleman came up, told me in a video chat. He said, dude, watch what I'm going to do with my podcast. Watch what I'm going to do on Twitter. His name was King something. I always forget it. I think his first name was David, from New York. And he promoted his website. No, his podcast. He put a link. And I said, damn it, that's a good idea. So a few of us started doing that. And then guess what? It became popular to promote your freaking podcast on Twitter. Because the information is immediate on Twitter. You don't have to wait for somebody to upload a podcast. Well, not only upload, but you have to edit the damn podcast, make sure it's ready to be uploaded. And then when you start the uploading process, you got to promote the damn thing. So on Twitter, it was a whole lot easier to say what you wanted to say, to post a clip of your audio or make a video clip saying what you got to say, and boom, people are going to see it immediately instead of having somebody editing a video or editing a podcast, promoting it, coming up with clever ways to, write a description and promote the damn thing, and then you upload it. And by then, the information is already old news. So now we're seeing news outlets, celebrities, politicians, everybody's using Twitter in the same fashion. So now that I'm thinking about it, because, I'm all over the place, but now that I'm thinking about it, the video game community that I helped to flourish, right? We did a lot of freaking things that are now the common practice. And one of them is promoting your content on Twitter, leaving links. It's podcasting. Podcasting, there was a time in 2005 where podcasting was not recognizable. Like people didn't know what the hell it meant. But a lot of people within the gaming community were trying it out. There were so many people who used to invite me to their podcast because they were like, "Look, you're one of the, first to do this. Do you mind coming on my podcast to be my first guest?" And I would do it, and then I would give them, pointers on how to freaking host and how to interview, and that all stems from my background in sales and stuff like that, and just plain and simply being capable of speaking to people. And that was one of the things that I told them. I said, make believe you've known these people for a long time, right? Don't really go and kiss ass because somebody is a developer or a voice actor. On the post-game report, we've had voice actors, we've had developers, public relations people. We've had a lot of pretty big celebrities. Well, not celebrities, but important people within the gaming community or in the industry, period. Even with SFX 360, we met a game developer from Mommy's Best Games. We met him at a diner. Him and his wife. They were amazing people. Amazing people. Very friendly. Very passionate about the games they were developing. And this gentleman worked for Naughty Dog. And then he went and created Mommy's Best Games. And you'll recognize his work on the Xbox platform. So I've been around a very long time. And I'm going to miss those moments that I just spoke about. The community aspect of going to E3 or viewing E3 from your home, in my case, from my home, going to different PAX events every year, going to different preview events. I mean, I went to plenty of preview events and hung out with friends of mine. I'm going to miss all that shit. Now I can't do it. Even if it was around, I wouldn't be able to do it because of my brain injury. I can't be around big crowds, a lot of noise. I just can't. Like, I would get a freaking panic attack and start body slamming people. I just can't. So even if it was around, and there have been some recent New York events, I could have been invited to them. I unfortunately wouldn't have been able to go. But here's a funny story, right? Like, it's a funny story, at least to me, because it was kind of embarrassing. And this is how I used to mess with people. So one day a friend of mine calls me from Florida. He's like, "Yo, I'm going to New York. Are you free these days, these certain days?" I'm like, yeah. I got to work. They're on weekdays, but, we can meet up in Manhattan. So he's like, cool. I'm going to go preview a wrestling game by the WWE. And I forgot the publisher. And I was like, all right, cool, man. Let me know where it's at. And we can meet around there if you're still there after I get out of work. So it was THQ. So THQ was the publisher. So see, this is the thing I used to do with friends, right? Because I'm a very competitive motherfucker. What I did was I called a friend of mine and I said, who's running? And I might have spoken about this in a previous episode. I called somebody. I said, who's running the preview event for this wrestling game on Monday in New York City? I got a response, right? The person that called gave me that information, gave me the person's email address. I was like, thanks a lot, man. I emailed the individual. They say, all right, last minute, but we'll get you in. Just show up. I'll put you on the list. So I show up. I get my media badge. I walk into the fucking media area where they had all these seats set up and they had wrestlers like the Big Show, uh, Ricky Steamboat. That was I said the Big Show already, but I believe um, ah, Mean Gene was there. Mean Gene Oakland, and the big Irish wrestler. I have a picture with him, Sheamus. So anyway, there were a few more. Anyway, so they have this huge seating arrangement for the media and this big stage where they're going to show the game, and then the wrestler's going to come out, talk about the game, and then we're going to all play it. I show up, I see my friend, he looks at me, and he's like, what the fuck? I sit next to him, he's like, I didn't know you were coming. I said, neither did I until you told me about it. And he's like, what? I said, yeah, you had this cocky tone in your voice. So I wanted to remind you that you're not the only one who knows people, right? And he's like looking at me like, you motherfucker. So cut through all the, crap. It was like an hour of, talking and blah, blah, blah. It came time to preview the game. I'm playing the game. I see he was the old announcer for the WWF and WWE. And I remember fanboying over this dude because he was part of my like early teen years till like maybe 20 years old when I stopped watching wrestling and then got back into it. I believe it's Howard Finkel. And his voice is legendary, right? Every freaking old school wrestling match you hear is, I believe, Howard Finkel announcing the wrestlers and then announcing a new heavyweight champion, So I'm fanboying over him. I remember I had an MP3 recorder and he recorded, you're listening to the post-game report, I wish I could find that damn audio. And then I see my boy, Hip Hop Gamer. Now, here's the funny part, right? I'm eating, like, they had all these types of finger foods and everything like that. So I remember I was eating something that was kind of garlicky, and it was like shrimp or something. And he comes up and he's like, yo, what's up, bro? What's up? So we're freaking giving each other a high five, not high five, but a five, giving each other a hug. And then he's like, asking me, yo, what do you think about the game? And so I'm talking to him and I smell the stuff on my breath. And I'm like thinking as I'm talking, like, damn, my breath, shit is strong. So as I was thinking that, Hip Hop Gamer does this, and it's universal. Everyone does this when somebody has funky breath. We kind of do this cough like, and then we lower our freaking, nose. And so I saw him do that. Like he tried to do it on the sneak, and he did it while I was talking. So what I did on purpose was I started getting closer and talking even heavier, like emphasizing the H's and all. And then finally, I backed away and I was like, yo, I'll be back. I'm going to, find something to get this damn funk away. And he gave me this smirk like, oh, man, thank you. So, yeah, that's how I am with people, like I'll fuck with people. I see something and I'll fuck with them. And that was like one of those memorable moments. Like, as a matter of fact, I remember in that event, I met Antoine Perlman, who is now, a filmmaker. And I remember meeting him. He was just getting into, writing about video games and stuff like that. And he was telling me his goals and stuff like that. And he's like, yo, I followed you and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, "Can you give me advice?" And I was like, "Dude, just find what you love about this stuff. You know, if you love writing or talking or making videos, whatever it is, focus on that first and then expand on everything else. But master what you love the most about this part, whether, you know." And he was writing and then he got into video stuff. So he's still doing it after all these fucking years. And he even has like some movies that he was somehow involved in on Amazon, which is crazy. And I remember meeting the guys who used to own DualShock, DualShockers. They were coming up. They were brand fucking new, and I remember meeting them. So the last like gaming centric event that I went to was when I met up with a guy named Godfrey, and we met up in Manhattan. Now this was a few months after my brain injury. And I remember he was like, "Yo, this new thing is opening up in New York, and they do LAN games and blah blah." My friend Red Infamy, she was there. So I go and I meet him there, and there's a bunch of people talking, and it felt it was very similar to being at a freaking preview event or a tiny PAX event. And one kid was talking to me, telling me about his plans, and I that's when I first started to get like real bad. Uh, and I'm blanking out here. Uh, I was getting. Damn, I'm blanking out. I'm doing too much. But that's when I realized something was wrong because this dude was talking to me, and I couldn't focus on what he was saying. Then I started sweating, and then I started seeing the crowd, and I'm like, "Oh shit, what the fuck am I doing here?" This dude is talking, and I don't hear anything he's saying. So I had to tell Danny, "Yo, I'll see you later, man. I'm out." And I couldn't really sit there and tell him, "Yo, my mind is bugging out right now." I had to leave. I had to leave. And events like that, I used to hang out the whole freaking time. Like my wife would have to tell me, "Yo, you got to come home." So yeah, that was the last time I got together with people to hang out. I remember going before that to a Comic Con, and I only stood for a little while. If it wasn't that I met a few friends there, I believe it was Danny Pena and Tony Polanco. I met them there, and if it wasn't for that, I would have left. But I waited for them, and we got we um trying to there's people in my house. Um, we were catching up, and then I was like, "Guys, I'm out." So yeah, that was the last freaking gaming centric gathering I was part of, and I no longer do it. And it takes me time to do these podcasts because I mean it's been a while since I did a podcast, since I did a post game report, and I've been busy. I've been busy, so I'm taking care of my health, taking care of coming up with a new lifestyle to become healthier, trying to exercise my brain, self self heal because it's been 3 years since I got injured, since a 15-pound object landed on my fucking head from 3 feet above, and that changed everything. But thankfully, I can still reminisce about the good old days, the positives, the great things this community was able to do together. And now, when I look at and I see how profitable podcasting has become, and how people have used specifically Twitter the way we used to use it back in the day, we came up with something, and it we're, as a community, we're not going to be recognized as the first to start these things, but it's nice to know internally. It's nice to know that I was part of something before it became the norm, And the fun part is when, I go on social media and I talk shit on Twitter, make fun of Xbox or whatever. And then I have these people coming at me who assume that I don't know what I'm talking about. They look at my fucking Twitter followers. I believe it's like a little over 800 or whatever. And, they think I'm some chump who doesn't know anything about video games, the industry, life, whatever. And I do that on purpose because people are quick to assume that they know you when in reality they don't know shit about you. And you can just trigger people with a few words, and it's the funniest fucking shit that I can think of. It's hilarious. So the reality is, I've been around. I've been around, and I'm proud to say that I've been around in this industry, in this whole social media movement. I've been there from the get go. Unfortunately, I don't get paid for it. I had a great career as an elevator technician, so I had no reason to leave, a career that I also loved. And that was fixing elevators and rescuing people from broken elevators and shit like that. So yeah, but it's unfortunate we don't have these gaming events anymore that we can visit. There were plenty of fucking video game preview events. There were, man, especially in New York. Like, you don't hear about them, but there were always opportunities in New York City where a publisher would say, "Hey, I'm going to be showing this game off in New York City. You want to go?" And of course, I'd show up, and my friends would be there. Some of them were out of town. Some of them were from New York City. And then we make a friggin' evening out of it. We would do the event, and then we would go out to eat and hang out. And it was a bonding experience. It was a beautiful thing. Nobody was trying to backstab nobody. Nobody was lying, making false accusations on videos or their podcasts or their social media feeds for likes and clicks. Nobody did that shit. Everybody was genuine. Everybody was covering video games because this is what they loved. Unfortunately, the love for covering video games, being in the media, being an influencer, and listen, the I've been in freaking events. I've been invited to events, and I've been to events. I'm trying to make sense here, where it was specifically aimed at influencers. I remember the first one I went to was for an NBA, I believe it was NBA Live. It was by EA, and it was in New York City. And when I got there, they gave me this bag. It was strictly for influencers. You had to have, and I didn't know this. I just got invited like last second. And when I looked inside, it was a fucking laptop. I was like, yo, they're giving away laptops? It's like, yeah, man, that's what they do in these big freaking influencer parties. And there were barely anybody playing the fucking games. Everybody was just there conversating, eating hors d'oeuvres, and having free drinks. It was the weirdest shit. So when it comes to influencing people, I guess I'm one of the first influencers as well when it comes to video games. I'm one of the originals because back then we did it for the right reasons. We didn't become influencers for self gratification. And listen, if you're hustling and that's what you want to do, and you take advantage of it because it's very easy to do, hey, good for you. If you can make a living out of it, you know what? You got to do what you got to do. Which leads me to my last point. I forgot the guy's name. Something Forge Gaming or whatever. A lot of people have been retweeting this guy on my feed on Twitter. He used to be known as No Rage some shit or Lano or something. Now, if you recognize those names, there's a history. I'm not going to get into that. I didn't know the guy, whatever. But he did have some kind of controversy surrounding uh, events and stuff and bad behavior. But I started seeing this guy who looks like Colin Moriarty and has this annoying fucking voice. He's been retweeted on my feed. And people are like, yo, this guy's dropping the truth. Oh, you got to listen to this guy. And I'm like, he's reiterating the same shit a lot of content creators have been saying since 2012. Why is this brand new? Why is this being hyped? Why is this guy all of a sudden the Ayatollah of video games, right? And then I realized he's not a person of color. So his opinion might be taken more serious than somebody with my skin tone or darker. And I truly believe that because I remember how race was an issue in video game media and video game events. So it's weird because I see guys like the RDX podcast, there's a few other ones. I can't remember their fucking names, but they all do the same shit. They all sound alike. They all write these elaborate clickbaity titles. They have these thumbnails, and it's all similar, right? Like Xbox is finally upgraded and blah blah blah. But then when you watch the video, they don't explain anything, right? They're just talking a bunch of bullshit for 10 minutes to get that revenue. Those guys are taken serious. But when somebody tells the truth, we're taken as, or we are labeled toxic or insignificant. I think it's Cunt Eastwood or something. There's another guy. There's a few. There's quite a few. They all hang out together. They all put similar thumbnails, similar clickbaity titles. They sound the same. The delivery is the same. They're using the same fucking Shure microphone, using the same kind of music. It's very comical, but it's something that I've noticed, and I'm not afraid to say it because it's the fucking truth. If you're a person of color, your opinion has less merit than a person with a lighter complexion. I don't want to say black, white, Hispanic, blah, blah, but it's the fucking truth. And video games is not a place to exclude racism or bigotry or favoritism. All of that shit still applies to the video game community, to the video game industry. Life is life, no matter where you're at. You could be at a freaking book club, and there's still going to be freaking those situations where somebody, a white person, will say the same exact shit you just fucking said, and everybody's going to applaud that white person. Same shit with this Forge guy, whatever the fuck his name is. I got nothing personal against him. I got something more against the people that are hyping this fucking guy up because he's stating the same shit about Xbox, about PlayStation that people have been saying for a long fucking time. So the only thing I can think of is the skin, the color of his skin, being his opinions, which are reiterated, have been said over and over again by plenty of fucking talented content creators. For some reason, his content is being taken serious and retweeted and applauded. And the only thing I could think of, because the guy's voice is fucking annoying, and he has no special graphics, and nothing special about what he's saying, but the color of his skin makes him seem more important, I guess. His opinion matters more. And I know some people don't want to hear this shit, but hey, fuck it. So yeah, I'm going to end with that because it's something that I noticed for a few weeks now. And then I was like, wait a minute. There's one thing that he's saying very similar things, but there's something that isn't similar. And that has to be the deciding factor as to why people are taking him more serious and applauding his thoughts, even though people like me and other great content creators have been saying for fucking 10 years. Strange, but not that strange. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm JVB. You guys take care.